Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Improve Marketing ROI 11 Times with Influencer Marketing Automation. So thanks for joining us. My name is Dallas Jessup, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Bright Talk, the global destination for professionals for content. Now, some of today's hottest brands, from Target to Lego to General Electric and Coca-Cola, are all leveraging influencer marketing to really expand the reach and success of their marketing programs. Now, if you're tuning in, you're probably looking to understand how and why you should incorporate influencer marketing into your company. Now, today's speakers are going to share exactly how you can increase pipeline success by 11 times over traditional advertising through influencer marketing automation. So today's experts, we're joined by Rustin, the founder and chief product officer of TapInfluence. Rustin has been working on scaling and measuring influencer marketing for over 7 years. He has a master's degree in electrical engineering and left his position at Aerospace to start TapInfluence in 2009. So Banks is a contributing author to Wired, Tech Cocktail, Entrepreneur.com, and has been named by Forbes as one of the top 10 leaders in changing content marketing. So welcome, Rustin.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
And then we're also joined by Joshua Books. Joshua is the Client Consulting Manager at Nielsen Catalina Solutions. He has over 5 years of business development experience in the consumer packaged goods industry after completing his marketing and finance degree at Syracuse University. Books earned his IAB Digital Media Sales Certificate in 2015 and looks to continue his education in advertising technology, data analytics, and marketing in the near future. So I'll pass the mic back to Rustin in just a second, but if you could bear with me for just a little bit while I cover a few quick notes about the presentation and the Bright Talk platform. So today's webinar will be available on demand after we wrap up and will be accessible through the URL you're currently on. So you don't even have to wait for us to send you an email, although we will. So feel free to share that link directly or use the social icons on your screen. Now, if you have a question at any point during the presentation, make sure to ask it using the Ask a Questions tab. So we'll be answering the questions at the end of today's session, and if we don't happen to get to your question, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards with an email. So without further ado, over to you, Rustin.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we did get one comment that said there is an echo. That might be we just have two presenters in the room with their microphones on, so hopefully we'll get that taken care of and immediately. So hi, everyone. So excited to share this time with you and share this study with you. So again, I'm Rustin Banks. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer of TapInfluence. And really why I'm so excited is this study literally is over a year in the making, meaning I just checked my email and Joshua and I actually had our first conversations in October of 2014 about doing a sales effect study in the influencer marketing space. And we'll talk more about this study, and we'll talk about how Nielsen Catalina has done thousands of these studies in traditional digital advertising, whether that's display or video, but never before in the content space. And so really we had this desire to tie influencer marketing to sales, and it took a year to find that champion who believed the same vision as we had, that content can really move the ball forward and content can be measurable like other types of digital advertising. And that was Joshua at Nielsen Catalina Solutions. So the study didn't take a year to run, but it did take a year to set things up and get things going. And we now run these much faster in the future. But this is very relatively recent, so excited to share these results with you. So let's jump in. So before we start, I do just want to share quick 4 things that you need to know about influencer marketing before we get started. And the first thing is that you're in the right place, meaning that searches for influencer marketing grew 5 times in 2015. And they're on the track to exceed that in 2016. So amazing growth as people realize that a content-based solution plus distribution is the ultimate 1-2 punch. And that's what you get with influencer marketing. This is also being fueled by ad block. People now are raising their hands and saying, I don't want to see distractive-based advertising. I want to see advertising and marketing that actually helps me, that gives me content from someone that I can trust, someone that I can relate to. I don't want a brand yelling at me. I want someone I can relate to sharing a good story with me. And then finally, this is why content marketing is such a big priority for CMOs in 2016, the number one priority. So really this whole study stems from a conversation I was having with Disney. And we sat down with Disney and they said, look, we want to move budget into influencer marketing. We want to move big budget into influencer marketing. But in order to do that, we need to know that it drives sales. We need to know it drives sales, just like our TV drives sales, just like our digital advertising drives sales. And I said, well, how do you know that? How do you know that a TV ad is actually connected to sales? They said, well, there's this amazing company called Nielsen and Nielsen Catalina Solutions that helps with that. They're able to track those impressions to the offline sales and actually compare that to that of a control group and actually tell us how effective our online advertising is. So that's when I was hooked, and I said, okay, we need to do this for influencer marketing. And Disney said, oh, you can't do it for influencer marketing. You don't have the scale. You've got to get a lot of scale before you can track these things. And I said, you know what? Digital influencer marketing has really matured to this space where we have customers spending millions of dollars a year through our platform influencer because they know it works. They have their own internal measures. And so Disney was just floored, and they said, wow, you probably can. And that's where Nielsen came in, and I got a chance to meet Josh and talk about how we could apply his solution to influencer marketing. So now Josh is going to jump in and give you a little background on Nielsen Catalina Solutions.
Thank you, Rustin. Moving ahead to our slide here, really what the core of NCS, Nielsen Catalina Solutions, what we do is it's a joint venture between Nielsen Company and Catalina Marketing. And what we do is we link what consumers watch with what they buy in a single source, matching what the households see in terms of advertising directly and then what they buy in offline sales. So on the left side, we have the exposure data, or the Nielsen media data here. And this campaign specifically was all digital media. But as you know, Nielsen traditionally also touches other realms, including set-top box data, mobile, which is also sort of part of digital now, radio, and then print, as well as a few others as well. But then what we do is once we capture that exposure data, we anonymize the households, no PII is shared, and then we link that up with the other side, which is the households from the buy data. So we use frequent shopper data or loyalty cards for over 75% of United States households. Our database now, using the Catalina network point of sale information, is up to 90 million households in total. And then we also layer the Catalina stuff with Nielsen HomeScan as well, which is an all-outlet representation of 100,000 voluntary households. And these purchases really go outside of the traditional grocery and pharmacy and convenience store purchases, so things like alcohol, things like health and beauty products, as well as pet food as well. So once again, once we understand the households from both sides, they're anonymized, and then we bring them together in one single source collection of households that, again, connecting the media that people consume with the products that they buy. However, it's not just purchase data, of course, that's going to inform your impression or that how we use it for audience selection as well. But let's go really quickly to review the purchase data on the top two arrows here on the left. So UPC level data, that stands for Universal Product Code or Unique Product Code. And what that is that is a code that comes directly from the manufacturer versus the retailer. So we have any specific descriptor, we have packaging claims, ingredients, etc. But this is the most granular level, the most deep and comprehensive level of information that you can get from a product. And this is very helpful when we're not only doing audience selection, but we're also measuring specific variants, whether it's a new line extension or a product launch. We are able to get down to the deepest and granular level of information there. And then also the shopping habits on the top right. So this goes all into the last 52 weeks. So the full year, we'll get into our methodology in a bit as we go into the measurement study. But again, we look back 52 weeks and we anonymize and match all these households based on their purchase behavior, their shopping habits in the last year. And then above and beyond that, Nielsen really helps us get into more demographic, socioeconomic, attitudinal survey data. And you can see from the left to right here, we're talking about all different types of surveys. I'm sure you've heard of a few of these: Spectra, Prism, Claritas, as well as really important things for households like life stage and lifestyle. So this is all about how they're actually conducting themselves, and we get into that with demographics as well. So size of household, gender, are there children present, their household education, employment type, household income, and of course their race and geography as well. So again, it's not just the purchase information that's really helping us dissect everything. We also layer on a bunch of attitudinal, custom segmentation, life stage, and demographics, all from the Nielsen panel. So Nielsen helps us on the household information, and Catalina really helps us out on the buy and purchase information. A little bit on our Catalina retailer network. As you can see here inside of the map, we do have the largest, most representative CPG data set in the nation. So again, we define CPG, consumer packaged goods, as health and beauty products, adult beverages, over-the-counter medicine, so no RX, home care, general merchandise, pet, and baby food as well. On the right here, we have a few bullets that go into our data set. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a total of 90 million households worth of shopper data. Again, that's more than 75% of the total U.S. in households. And as you can see below, we have 13 retailers listed with 26 specific banners, which translates to over 18,000 stores across the United States. Again, we're only in the United States here. But one of our core competencies and an amazing feature of our data is that all of the retailer data is commingled. And commingled is basically saying we can combine all of the purchases from one household for every single retailer. So we're getting a full, comprehensive look at everything they're buying. Because we have these retailer relationships through Catalina, we don't have to isolate or leave out any retailer. We can take a look and combine every single purchase, which is critical in understanding, again, the purchase habits, but also selecting and then measuring a household so we don't miss any single purchase. That shopper data is then calibrated with Nielsen HomeScan. I briefly mentioned Nielsen HomeScan, again, that 100K voluntary panel. But what that calibration is really doing is accounting for products that, again, fall outside of the traditional channels or retail outlets. But these households, we also have a single source household, that collection group of households that is the HomeScan as well as the FSD Catalina network. And that is calibrated, basically like an index is created, how they purchase and how they perform outside of the Catalina network. That is added back into that anonymous single source household. So again, we're kind of indexing and getting a deeper understanding and a deeper look as to how they're buying, not only in grocery and traditional channels, but in other ones as well. So all of this information, again, it comes right from the cash register, as Catalina is historically known for their couponing. So we get daily purchase logs. Again, it goes back 52 weeks in real time. It's a rolling 2 years. We have 2 years worth of back data, and we're able to access 52 weeks in terms of audience selection. And then again, our matching methodology for measurement, that looks back a full year as well. UPC level information. We already reviewed this quickly, but again, this is the most granular level of a product. So the reporting out on it compared to SKU, stock keeping unit, UPC level information It's much deeper, and we have over 2.2 million total UPCs in our collection and database. And then again, we have that 2-year history, so we can look back 2 years, but in terms of methodology, it is 52 weeks in measurement. So again, 2 years of CPG purchases really helps eliminate other factors that I'll get into in our methodology, but it's we found, again, with the 52-week looking back, that is the most effective way to only isolate advertising exposure. We have a quick question here before I move on. How are you collecting this data of shopping habits? Yeah, so the home scan panel specifically, that does have multiple surveys. So if you're part of that voluntary panel, you're getting surveyed every single year on a variety of different topics. And then again, the shopping habits, when we're collecting that data on the Catalina side, that comes from the actual loyalty card. So when you're swiping your card and you're making a purchase, that frequent shopper card, that information, of course, has your household address as well as linking with other third parties that we use for matching agents as well. And then we have one more quick question before I move on. What was the daily purchase log? So again, that's just referring back to the cash registers and the Catalina network. So the data that we are receiving gets updated daily, and then it goes into our system. It takes about a week lag to get that information as well. So again, that goes directly from the Catalina, the point of sale, the cash registers, into our network, and it's updated basically daily. So it looks like we answered those few questions, and now I'm going to pass it back to Rustin, and he can briefly talk about the methodology, and then we'll get into the exciting stuff, the results, and the performance.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. So again, the title of this webinar is Driving Influencer Marketing ROI through Automation. And the bottom line here is that Nielsen Catalina Solutions has built this ingenious system where they can track the online activities of people who view content online and track that back to their point of sale purchases for CPG and food brands, like Josh said. This is so exciting because at the end of the day, what everyone cares about is how is my marketing or advertising driving sales? And Nielsen Catalina has solved this problem, and again, they've done it thousands of times in the traditional space, and this is the first time ever in the influencer marketing space. So first, we're going to walk you through this study that we did with a Fortune 500 food brand, and then we're going to show you how they got the results. We're actually going to peel away the secret, if you will, and give you the secret sauce of how they got these results. So let's jump into the methodology. So here's what we did. Again, we partnered with this Fortune 500 food brand, first ever influencer marketing sales effects study. First time ever done in this space and showing the results to you today. So what they did is the customer went into our software, and we'll talk about more how this works later, but essentially there's a marketplace of 45,000 registered embedded influencers. And they chose 258 of them, fitness and food influencers, to create content on behalf of this brand. But the key here is that they didn't choose them looking at their profile, their reach, or their rate necessarily. They chose them based on some performance data that we gave them inside of our software and some audience data that takes all those things into account. And I'll talk to you more about that later. So then they went in and they asked these 258 influencers, and then this is influencer marketing, right? So for those of you new into the space, influencer marketing is simply working with online influencers to create content on behalf of your brand together. And so they simply asked the influencers to create a recipe or a story around Meatless Mondays. And this was during the football season. So it could be a football party with meatless appetizers, could be a Meatless Monday recipe, could be a family gathering around a Meatless Monday night event. And then they had a very simple assignment, meaning all you had to do was include the product inside of the content. And whether that was a product shot, whether that was in the ingredients list, they left a lot of creative freedom up to the influencers. And in this case, it was long-form based, meaning it was blog post based. And of course, everything was fully FTC disclosed, meaning that it was disclosed that this was sponsored content on behalf of the brand. So again, this was long-form content based, meaning that the branded content lived in those long-form posts, but then the influencers shared that content out via their social networks. So they shared them on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram even, and drove traffic back to those posts, but that was all included inside of the cost of working with the influencer. So there was no additional paid distribution on top of this. There were no ads or no Taboola or Outbrain or anything like that driving back to this influencer content. It was all automated by the TapInfluence platform. So this is what our software, one core of what our software does. It does the workflow automation, management, tracking, including the payments and FTC disclosure insertion and monitoring. And then this is how the pixel was automatically inserted into all the content. So inside of our software, you can see on the left, there's a place called retargeting and conversion tracking pixels. And the key there is for long-form content programs, and I should emphasize here that our software does a lot more than long-form content programs. We do video programs, Instagram programs, social assignment programs. But in the case of a long-form content or blog post program, whatever you paste inside of this box automatically gets inserted into each blog post. So in this case, we took the Nielsen Catalina tracking pixel, we made it so that it could live in a content environment, and then we pasted it here so it would automatically get inserted into all 258 different blog posts. So then when someone clicks over social media, lands on this blog post, that's when Nielsen Catalina then attempts to match that person, anonymously of course, to their purchase data and to their loyalty card data essentially, or to someone on their panel to look at how much they purchased that product in the past and how much they purchased that product in the future. And not only that, but I'll let Josh take over here. This is where the real magic comes in. They actually also compare that to a control group. So I'll let Josh share that.
Thanks, Rustin. Exactly. So I think I teased this a little bit, but again, we look back 52 weeks once we receive the exposure data, and we use that exposure data basically with the tracking pixel and using cookies. We utilize Neustar as our matching agent and our third party to, again, anonymize the households, so we don't have any private information, no PII. So all of the data is kept anonymous, but we have in our network, Neustar and our matching agency is able to match the tags, the households that were exposed with those cookies, with the Catalina network of those households and how they are buying. So again, when we look back 52 weeks, we're matching it really on two different types of variables. Again, the first variable is purchase behavior. So that purchase behavior goes all the way down to the specific product. So in this case, the soy milk, right? But we also go up to the category. So how are they buying milk in general? How often? How many times are they going to a retailer? What is their purchase cycle? When is the last time they purchased? As well as other complementary products and taking a look at their purchase mix in that category as well. So that's the purchase information, again, looking back 52 weeks on that household. And then we also, of course, get the Nielsen information and match on the socioeconomic and the household demographics info. So that is the, again, household income, presence of children, geolocation. So we're not going to match a household that lives in Washington with one in Florida. And we're also not going to match a household that has 4 or 5 cats with one that has 1 dog and 2 babies. So at the end of the methodology, that 52 weeks, as you can see, the orange and the red, the test and control groups in the first year, they're virtually identical. But then once the campaign starts, that gap highlighted in the top right, that gap in between the red and the orange, that is the incremental sales. And that gap is really attributed to advertising exposure, because when we look back at that last year, they are matched identically on every single variable except if they've been exposed to the campaign or not. We'll pass it back to Rustin to get into the results there.
Awesome. So this is what really sold me when Josh told me about this, because everyone's big complaint was, well, if you're doing these sales, how do I know it was my marketing that drove these sales? And the great thing about having that control group is it gets rid of all those effects of any other in-market advertising or any other seasonality that takes place, and all you're looking at is really the isolated effect of the influencer marketing. Everything else should be averaged out and should be taken care of with that control group, which is amazing because everybody knows that you don't want to spend marketing on sales that were going to happen anyway. You only want to spend marketing dollars on those incremental sales. All right, so I was hooked, and we said, let's do this study. So we ran the study, and here are the results. Well, first off, I'll get into the details. So we definitely learned that exposed people purchase more, and significantly more. And we'll get into exactly what that means here in a second. This is also a fascinating thing that I learned that Nielsen Catalina could do, is they can actually look at what we call shopping cart share. They can say, well, if they did purchase more of the brand products, these here in blue, and we have had to anonymize here, they can actually break these out into what actual products they were. What did they purchase less of? Maybe it was a competitive product. Maybe it was another product in your brand set. And they can actually look at the shopping carts of the exposed group before and after and compare that to the control group. So I thought that was fascinating. So we did notice that they did purchase more of the brand's product and actually less of the competitor's products or even a private label product. So let's get into that sales lift number. Again, how effective were we at driving incremental sales, or how effective was influencer marketing at driving incremental sales? So let's click here. The first thing before we get into the numbers is know that the great thing that Nielsen Catalina does, they normalize the data down to what are the incremental sales per 1,000 impressions in the case of digital or of traditional or display advertising. So if you were to do a study in display advertising, they would tell you what are the incremental sales per 1,000 impressions of that display advertising. And in this case, it's per 1,000 views of the influencer content. Now, so in this case, the results are this. 1,000 people viewing influencer content generated $285 of incremental sales over the control group. So meaning you take 1,000 people and you sit them down in front of the influencer content, and those 1,000 people over time generated $285 of incremental sales over the control group. And obviously the customer was very pleased with that result, and why? But let's really break this out into what this means. Are the results good? Are these good numbers? What was the customer used to seeing? So again, it's a little different, but we need to understand the difference between an impression and a view of influencer content. Now, in the impression space, what they were used to seeing in their display ads is that they were used to seeing about $16 of incremental sales per 1,000 impressions of display ads in that space. And again, in this case, we're getting $285 of incremental sales per 1,000 views of influencer content. So again, influencer marketing is certainly performing higher on a view than an impression, many times higher, 16, 17 times higher. But also, it can cost more to get 1,000 views of influencer marketing content than display ad content. So that view is working harder for you than an impression in this case, even 17 times harder. Now, how do you get those views on a cost-effective basis then? How do you get the cost in line? If you know that the top line is going to be higher, how do we get the bottom line? So I'll talk more about that, and we'll get into actual ROI that takes into account the spend in a moment. But before, so we sat down and we said, look, why? Why on a per view basis is it 17 times higher? And the first thing is, look, when this tracking pixel fires, that means someone's actually leaning forward and engaging with the content. And that means they're truly engaged versus a display ad where that impression pixel may have fired, and that person may or may not have even seen that pixel. In fact, there are some studies that say a vast percentage of display ads are certainly not even in a viewable space. And then the other big reason why is the halo effect. This is the whole promise of influencer marketing. When that person clicked over to the influencer content, they had an affinity for that influencer. They said, I trust this person is like me. And when that person creates content on behalf of the brand, that is an endorsement for the brand. Whether they flat out say that I love this particular product or not, the fact that they're partnering with them to create a recipe that includes that content is an endorsement. That halo effect passes to the brand. And that doesn't happen in the display advertising space, meaning people know that the display ads surrounding someone's content are neither affiliated with nor endorsed by the person creating that content. Okay, so again, we're going to get into the actual ROI here in a moment, but first there's actually a little more to the story. When you're comparing the cost of two different types of marketing campaigns, just note that with influencer marketing, there is no additional cost of content creation, meaning that the costs that we show in the ROI here, they have the cost of content creation included. That's different than, say, a display ad where you might have to pay a creative agency to create those display ads, or maybe a digital video or a TV commercial where you might pay $100,000 for a TV commercial. So just know with influencer marketing, you don't have to pay any more for the content. And not only that, the content actually pays for itself because you can reuse it. So we know lots of brands who actually fuel all their social media content by reusing influencer content. In fact, I know particular brands who've actually fired their own internal design teams because they found they could get better content created cheaper by reusing influencer content versus having an internal design team create that content and pay for a test kitchen downstairs and all the costs that are associated with creating content. They found influencers could do it better, cheaper. And that doesn't even count that the influencers would then share that with their audience and drive traffic to that content so they don't have to pay for the traffic. Okay, but here's the real kicker. So when Josh and I stopped this study in November, 540,000 people had been tracked as reading that influencer content, meaning that they'd actually gone and navigated to those posts. Then when we look back at the end of February, 1.3 million people had read the influencer content with no additional paid promotion. This was all through people finding the content through organic search, having it keep on getting recycled through Pinterest, etc. This is the value of long-form evergreen content, or evergreen content in general, meaning it lives forever and you can always find it. You can find it with Google searches. Someone will find it in Pinterest, they'll pin it, and then their friends will see it, and they'll pin it, and it can keep on recycling months, years, in fact, even after the content has gone live. And we actually verified that with a historical program that had run for 12 months. And sure enough, here's how many views per month the content got when it went live on the left-hand side of the screen. Then look how many views it gets with no promotion from the influencers at all. Just from the natural organic Google search or Pinterest traffic, it doubled or tripled its impressions in the 9 months after the content went live versus the first 3 months when the content did go live. This is the long tail effect. And this actually happened with our influencer with this program as well. So this is the actual study program. So it actually got more views in December than when the content went live. Then in January, it was doing what we were thought it would do. Then we saw this huge spike in February. And I'm like, what is going on this first week of February? Well, it turns out that was the Super Bowl and everybody was going to Pinterest or going to Google and searching for football parties or meatless football parties. And sure enough, a huge spike in the content without any paid promotion. So this is amazing. So what this means is we showed this to the brand and he said, holy cow, this is the gift that keeps on giving, meaning I just have to pay for this once and I keep getting all these more views. That means that effectively my CPM just keeps dropping, and it keeps dropping forever. It never stops dropping with long-form evergreen content. And in this case, we can actually see, here's its trajectory. The CPM is dropping. Now, when the influencer content was done going high, it's a very high $180. That seems insanely high to pay. But this actually keeps dropping. It has a half-life of 3 months. Every 3 months, that CPM is dropping in half because you keep getting more views that you didn't have to pay any additional dollars for. And by the end of the year, this is going to be and we're tracking to this line or even beating this line in the display ad territory of about a $5 CPM. So think about that. By the end of the year, it's going to cost you $5 for every 1,000 impressions of influencer content, which is very similar to a display ad. But each impression is working 17 times harder for you than that display ad impression. So that's where we get this from, where we've talked about how influencer marketing can drive this kind of ROI. So if the CPM, if the cost decays over time, that means that the ROI actually goes up over time. So this is the actual dollar per dollar return of blog posts only. So this is only blog posts where we could actually track with that Nielsen Catalina tracking pixel, meaning as of February, they knew that if they spent $1 on these posts, they got $3 of incremental sales in return. But again, because they didn't have to spend any more dollars, that dollar was fixed, they kept getting more incremental sales. They kept getting more incremental sales. So by April, they'll be at $4. By the end of the year, they'll be at $20. That's unheard of for this brand. Just for reference, this brand says, well, $2 is good for me. If I can get $2 back for every dollar that I spend, that was a good marketing and advertising program. But if I can get $5, that's insane. $20, unheard of, unbelievable. And here, though, we have an actual tracking proof that that is possible and that is happening. And so this is where we talk about, when we talk about 11 times, how you can get 11 times versus display after 12 months, if you create performance-driven influencer marketing that's evergreen, they'll keep getting all those views, all those impressions well after the content's gone live. And this is how you can get 11 times because that display ad is going to hold static at $2. You don't get any additional impressions. Once the display ad program is over, it is done. Okay. And again, every number I just showed you is blog posts only, where we could actually track with that Nielsen Catalina tracking pixel. There were many more additional views on social. So meaning if someone pins it, it includes the product shop. Their ingredients list will actually get pulled into Pinterest. Someone can absolutely go shopping from this information without ever clicking through to the blog post. So there are many times more, 5 times more at least views on social media than there are on blog posts. We just couldn't pixel those. But that means if you start including social views as well, I'll get into that in a little bit, it could be insane, the ROI here. So again, we think we're being conservative tracking blog posts only when really there's 5 times as many views on social. And of course, it's immune to ad blockers because ad blockers don't block content. They only block ads. Okay, well, let's dive in to the count. There are fantastic questions rolling in, but we'll get through this one last section and then we'll answer some of these questions. So let's actually reveal the secret sauce then. How did they get this performance? So is this just all influencer marketing? Did they do something special? Well, look, we've found that there's really 2 keys to getting influencer marketing performance. One is getting the right influencers at the right rate, and 2 is asking them to do the right thing. Now look, with this program, there wasn't anything special about what they were asked to do. It was simply create a story or a recipe that included the brand's product. There was nothing special that they asked them to do. So here's the key. It's all in the influencers that you select. And in this case, a lot of times people will just select influencers based on who that influencer is, what their following is, and they'll call them up and say, well, how much do you charge to do a brand partnership? And they might say $1,000. And say, well, you have, 500,000 followers. Okay, maybe that feels right. We found that people got that right only about a third of the time. Meaning if you're doing it, selecting your influencers just based off their profile and their reach, you have a 30% chance of partnering with the right influencer. So what we did is layer 2 other levels of performance on top of that influencer. We put a performance data layer and an audience data layer on top of that influencer. And so what this looks like is now, so this is a view of our marketplace. Here you can see all the influencers. Again, there's 45,000 registered embedded influencers. And each influencer has listed their various rates for the different assignment types that we have in the platform. So we have a number of different templates, again, whether it's a video assignment, blog post assignment, Instagram assignment. and they've listed how much they charge on average for that type of assignment. Then we've gone in and we've actually measured when they've performed and been activated on behalf of the brand, what their cost per engagement was when they activated for a brand. So here you can see that we had the brand tell us that this was so helpful because in the past, they might have chosen this influencer who has a higher reach and a lower rate, but then they saw that there's something wrong with this influencer's sponsored content. Maybe she posts her sponsored content at midnight. Maybe she, heaven forbid, bought her followers or something like that. Well, what this does, then they said, well, this influencer is obviously a much better bang for the buck, even though she might charge a little more or have less followers. And we're transparent with this information. We show it back to the influencers. And we say, look, if you want to stay competitive in the marketplace, you either need to lower your rates or you need to increase your engagement on your sponsored content. What we've seen is as we've introduced this transparency in the marketplace, the influencers as a whole were slightly overpriced. And we have seen on a whole people lowering their rates to where they should be relative to the value that they're providing, such that brands aren't in risk of getting ripped off, if you will. Okay, so that's one layer of data that we put on top of influencers. The next is the audience data. So what we did then is a lot of people used to pick influencers based off of who that influencer was and does that influencer match my target audience. So we flipped this on its head. We said, look, you don't want an influencer who looks like your target audience. You want an influencer whose audience looks like your target audience. So we went in and we measured the audiences of all the influencers. And I can get into more how we did this, but it involves partnering with a bunch of third-party data providers, IBM Watson to name one, and downloading terabytes of third-party data and doing billions of rows of content analysis to actually say, okay, here's Chung Ra. She has 6 million followers. We've iterated and inspected all the public data on those 6 million followers, and we can tell you that 4% of them are between this age and have a household income above $100,000, for example. And again, we've done that across all the influencers in our marketplace. So then, now they go in and they choose influencers who have a high percentage of their audience who matches their target customer audience. Therefore, they're not just picking influencers blindly and hoping that their audience matches their target customer. So this was the key. We told the brand to use these two things to select their influencers. These are relatively new features that we built last year into the platform. And we found that the performance, since they've been using these things, and this has been verified by our other customers as well, that their performance has been about 3 times higher on their program since they started using this data, meaning that their cost per engagement, their cost per view is about 3 times higher, and therefore their ROI that follows this is 3 times higher as well. This is based, again, on auditing their programs since they've started using this data and afterwards. So the results on this whole study are a little bit of your mileage may vary. If you're doing influencer marketing the old way, using email and spreadsheets, not only will it take you 10 times longer to run the program, since our software automates 85% of that, also it's hard to get the performance that you're looking for to squeeze that ROI out if you don't have that performance or audience data. So again, this is how we talk about how influencer marketing automation can really improve the ROI of your marketing spend by 11 times. But again, you've got to be doing it right. You've got to be using evergreen content that can keep getting found again and again and keeps getting showed up and is shareable and is going to keep showing up in Google searches and is keep getting recycled around Pinterest and Instagram. But then again, the other key is using data. We are now in the era of performance-driven influencer marketing. It's no more about someone's reach and someone's profile and what they look like and how pretty a content they create. It's really about their performance. How well do they engage their audience with sponsored content? What does their audience look like? Does it match the audience that I'm trying to reach, or do I just really like this influencer because it's someone I follow? So that guessing game is done now. We've solved that using data-driven influencer marketing. So that's the content that I have. You can always find more at tapinfluence.com or tapinfluence.com/ROI. I'm going to answer some questions now. and we'll jump into that portion. So if you do have any questions, go in. It looks like we've already answered a few of them, but feel free to type them into the to the chat window now. Let's go turn it over to Becca, who's going to help us with that.
Yes, thank you, Rustin and Josh. That was a very informative presentation. So as Rustin said, we did answer quite a few of the questions through the presentation, but please continue to send questions through. Here's one question that came through. How are you isolating for attribution? Are you taking into account other media efforts?
That's probably a question for Josh. I'll let Josh dive into that one.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm stuck on mute there. Yeah, so isolating for attribution, it's a great question. Yeah, we definitely take into account other media efforts, but it's really our matching agency and Newstar and Cookie that gets that tag information, understanding what they have been exposed to during the life of the campaign, and then matching that exposure data with the specific advertisements, right? So the pixels in the blog posts there, we understand that. And then we also isolate based on everything else. So all those different variables, including the socioeconomic, the demographic stuff, as well as other cookie and Newstar information for their IP address, et cetera, all that browser history, all of those, the cache, the cookie, all that stuff, that definitely gets into account there. And attribution, again, it's all from that tracking pixel there. So it's definitely taking into account other media efforts, but with this specific campaign, it is tracking on the specific pixel that we have embedded in the TapInfluence blog post media.
Wonderful. Thank you, Josh. Another question came in. Is it common to include a clause with influencer contracts that they should not delete the post? Do influencers tend to delete these after the promotion ends?
Yeah, I can handle that one. That's a great question. So it is inside of that's another thing that the TapInfluence software handles, is there is a standard legal agreement that the influencers all agree to. We have some brands who will add addendums to that standard agreement. We have some brands who will replace it with their own. But the standard influence agreement says, yes, they do need to keep that content live. And really, most influencers do want to do that because they want all the additional traffic from it. They want people going to Google and searching for that for that content and coming to their site. So we really do see most influencers want to keep that content up and don't have a problem deleting it, but it would be against their contracts if they did, for some reason, delete that. It's a good question.
Terrific. So keep the questions coming through. We've got a few more minutes within this webinar, and we're happy to answer them. Okay. Well, we'll give it a few more moments to give people time to answer questions. But if there's no other questions, please feel free to send questions later, and we're more than happy to follow up with the answers. Thank you, Rustin. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be following up with those. Oh, actually, there's one more question that came in through. Do you guys mind just answering that real quickly?
No problem.
Okay. But if you aren't measuring or tagging other media efforts, so it seems like you're just looking at all other media efforts as equal across all control exposed?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that goes right back to the matching history, though. So that 52 weeks, we're not looking at all other media efforts as equal, because what we're doing is we're matching a household on a one-to-one basis based on how they're buying, based on all the other household demographic information. And when we use that tracking pixel, that's specifically for the TapInfluence media. So, of course, what we're trying to do is, in the last 52 weeks, with other market factors, with other advertisements in the specific campaign period, they're not equal because what we're doing is we're only isolating advertising exposure to TapInfluence media by using that tracking pixel. So, yeah, in an ideal world, they would only be exposed to that TapInfluence media, but it is possible they're exposed to other media. However, we feel that our methodology, looking back in the last 52 weeks, understanding how they bought all of this other information, that in real time in the campaign period, the only difference between the control and the expose is the advertising exposure specifically for the tag that has been used.
Great. Thank you, Josh. All right, so it looks like those are all the questions that came through. Again, feel free to follow up with additional questions that we're more than happy to respond to later on, and you will be getting a recording of this webinar that you can share along with your colleagues or friends and family. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.